Hey, what's going on, everybody? Welcome back to episode 2 of the Powerstroke swap slash Powerstroke build. In this episode, what we're going to start with is we're going to be doing the injector removal. So we're going to start by tearing the valve covers off on both sides and removing the fuel injectors. So I'm going to start here on the right side of the engine, the passenger side. With this thing out of the truck, super easy to get to. Obviously here where we got the bolt missing is a hard one to do in the cab because the heater box sits right over this back corner. If this were on a Super Duty, this whole back half is pretty much buried under the cab. Same on the other side. So this is actually going to go fairly quick. This is really easy to get to. So now I'm gonna, for right now, just leave this dipstick tube in, but I'm gonna pull this bracket out and just kind of work around that dipstick tube here for now. I don't want to pull it out mainly because I want to take a look at the pan a little bit more before I go taking that loose and don't want to disturb anything. All right, so now just want to carefully lift these covers off. We're going to set this aside. And now you can see all of our injectors, our wire harness, glow plug, everything. It's all accessible from right here. So the thing we want to be careful of is we want to get these wire harnesses out, but we don't want to break it like somebody already did on this one. So now if you look here, this right here is a connector coming into the valve cover harness. This is an early style. It has 2 connectors. Now, usually you can lift this little lock tab, slide this up, same on the bottom, and you can unclick this. If you notice here on this one, that lock tab's gone. Somebody's actually broken it off, and they put a little dab of silicone here in the corner to try and hold that connector together. So this right here can lead to problems because it's literally just set in here. Now if that pops loose, it'll end up killing these 2 injectors and those 2 glow plugs. So I'm gonna have to fix that before we go much further. These lower ones are actually pretty much intact. They're in good shape. There is an updated design valve cover. I don't think I'm gonna run it at this time, but what it ends up doing is it's this connector clicks into a molded connector and the wires come out here. These connectors actually disappear. They just go away. They're not there. So you don't have a failure point on those. These ones seem to be working okay, so I'm just going to run them for now. So I'm just going to very gently lift this connector up and kind of just walk it back using this little pocket screwdriver and just back that connector up and out of the way. These lower ones, same thing. We're just going to get right up underneath, lift that lock tab just enough to clear the lock, so that way we don't break this connector and end up needing to buy a new under valve cover harness. So that one there released, and now we'll just got to do this guy. All right, so we got that undone. So now we're going to lift this cover out very carefully so we don't break that plastic. There we go. So we're going to set this aside. So now we have our sub harnesses. Look at that. These 2 glow plugs here, I don't even think were plugged in. They just popped loose. So that may lead to some of my hard starting issue I had. Now these fuel injectors, to release them, you just lift this little wire lock, and then you push straight down on the connector. This connector here is almost exactly like what's on the IPR. So again, you lift the lock, push this down. Now there is no difference between front and back, right and left. The colors even are identical between the two. And the way that you're supposed to undo these from the glow plug is you just grab and pull. Just a light little tug straight up. They aren't held in very strong. But here you can see we got white and yellow, red and blue, red on the glow plug, blue and yellow for the injector. So the exact same right or left. Now this truck is actually a California emission 97 truck. So it runs AB code injectors. These are actually split shot injectors, meaning they're rated at 120 cc's, but they split that shot into 2 steps. So the first shot gets about 30 cc's of fuel, and that kind of helps to quiet the engine down when it's coming up on its compression stroke, and then it fires the other 90 cc's on top of it for the actual power delivery. So they're not the most efficient injector. They get the job done, but they're just intended to be quieter and a little bit cleaner than your regular single shot injectors. So now to get these fuel injectors out, you have a 5mm Allen head that holds this oil spout in place. So you want to make sure you take those out before you go taking the injector out. The injector is only held in with this 8mm bolt. And once you get those out, you can get underneath of here, pull straight back with a pry bar, and they pop right out. But these oil spouts are cast aluminum. They will break easily. You have to replace them if you crack them. They're not very expensive, but it's just more cumbersome to replace them instead of just taking them out and doing it right. All right, so that's what the oil spout looks like. Just like I say, plain Jane piece of cast aluminum. Okay, then once you get this bolt here out, now you should be able to get this collar here to come loose. And it's just going to float around inside of here. So, easiest way to get these off is with a pry bar. Push your collar up and get underneath of it. And then you just give this a little lift. And they come right out. Now, this is going to drain a bunch of oil down into the cylinder. The reason I'm doing it this way is because, again, I got to do injector cups. We're going to be doing a bunch of engine work here. I'm going to have the oil pan off of this again. Normally, you would pull this drain plug right here. There's another one up on the front, and that drains all the oil out of this oil manifold. So all this oil actually just drains into the head. It's really the only fluid that you would have going back down into the cylinder would be from the fuel side of the. So since now you kind of have an idea how these injectors come out and how the valve cover comes off, I'm just going to speed things up and pop these other 7 injectors out. guys, so I got these injectors cleaned up and I inspected everything. I did end up finding kind of what I was looking for. I did find a failed O-ring. So just to kind of give you guys here a little look. This injector here is out of cylinder number 2, which would be the very front on the driver's side. You can see we still have our copper washer intact. I don't have any carbon buildup on the nozzle. I have this nice bright orange O-ring. I have this one here. They all came out looking about the same with this black kind of rock hard burned stripe. This O-ring is actually supposed to be this hot pink color all the way around. And then this oil O-ring with its backer, it's actually like a nylon backer and a steel backer. These are all in good shape. This is kind of what I would expect to see taking this apart. Now, again, this is a perfectly good usable injector. I would just need to go and re-O-ring it. This injector here, we're kind of the same thing. We still have our copper washer. I don't have any carbon on this nozzle. Now you can see this O-ring here is starting to get a little bit tore up. It's not very smooth. It is a very hard O-ring. And then when we look at this one here, kind of the same thing. It's pink with the black stripe. It's rock hard. And I really don't know how well it's going to show on the camera here. But right here on this rubber O-ring, you can see it's very grainy. It's actually gotten so hard, it failed. And this is where the high pressure oil sets. So the high pressure oil probably just got hot and pushed it out. You can almost kind of see there's a line right across here at an angle where the O-ring tore, and there's a little section of it missing across there. So that is kind of what I was looking to try and find that would cause my little bit of a stumble when I'd first start it when it was cold. It would run rough. You could kind of feel it in just one cylinder. It wasn't really running right. And then within about 30 seconds, it would go away and everything would run fine. It never picked up a misfire or anything. But I had kind of suspected that I was going to find a failed O-ring. So I feel quite a bit better knowing now that that's what happened. Well, guys, that's about all the time I got for tonight. It's actually midnight right now, and I got to go get some sleep so I can go to work tomorrow, and we'll pick up where we left off. All right, everybody, I'm back. We got a new night here, and we're going to keep working away on the injector project here. So tonight, what I'm going to get done is I'm going to get the injector cups pulled out. So I have a couple of tools that a friend of mine was nice enough to let me borrow. So this is the tool that you thread into the cup to pull it out, and this is the driver to install it back in. Now Riff Raff makes a really nice tool that very similar to removing, but installing, instead of pounding it in with a hammer, they have one that will bolt in place of where the injector goes, and then it'll press it into place. It actually is a pretty slick tool, and I would highly recommend it if you're going to be doing injector cups while the truck still has the engine in it. Being that I have this engine on a stand, I have plenty of room to work, I can get a nice straight drive on these injector cups. I feel comfortable doing it this way. Now, if this engine was in the truck, I don't know that I would attempt it, because cylinder number 7, cylinder number 8, they're going to be really hard to get to, and trying to work around the heater box with a hammer is just going to be really hard to drive it in straight and to fully seat it. So being that I got a pretty good opportunity here to do it this way, I'm just going to use the tools that I have provided. All right, so kind of got this camera set here. Hopefully you guys can get a pretty good view. So first and foremost, probably one of the more important things to do on this job is to take some masking tape and just kind of fold it over, almost ball this up, drop it down in that hole, and then kind of pack this here into place with the screwdriver. Now what this is going to do is basically just keep any kind of debris from falling down into that hole. because we're going to be taking this big tap and tap into that brass fitting. It's going to create some metal shavings. We don't want that going into the engine. All right, so what we're going to do is just put a little bit of engine oil here on these threads, just to give good lubrication. And then we're going to set this down in the hole. Now this top plate here will actually help to center that. And then on this particular tool, it's a 12.13 millimeter head. And we're just going to give this a couple of turns. We only need about 4 or 5 full turns. You kind of feel it and hear it cutting into those threads. So we don't want to go until it bottoms out, but we do want to get a couple of good bites on there. All right, so now that we kind of got that where it's bit in, we're going to spin this nut down. Now we're going to switch over to a 19 millimeter socket for this particular tool. And we're just going to tighten this down, and it's going to give a little pop. Then that injector cup's just going to come right on out. And we're just going to crank this down until you feel pretty much no tension on it. Just like that. When it comes loose, and then out comes this injector cup. So now the thing to keep in mind here when you're doing this job, you have to have the coolant drained out of it. If not, when you pull this out, you have all the coolant from your cooling system. It's just going to go rolling right into the engine. So now if you look here, you can see we got a nice long strand of brass hanging off here from where it was cutting in. But with our tape being in the end, none of the shavings went down into the cylinder. So now to get this off, all you need to do is put the socket back in, and then grab on this end here with a pair of channel locks, and just give a couple of twists, and this will actually end up coming out. Nice and easy. So now you can see here a little bit better the filings I was telling you you want to protect from going down into your engine. Alright, so now that I kind of got this cup cleaned up, you can see down in here, you can see down in here where it was cutting threads into the cup, which is perfect. That's what we need this to do. That's what gives it the bite to pull this out. You can see at the top ring here and the bottom ring right here where it seals into the head, and then you have coolant that flows around this portion of it. So what we're going to do is I'm going to go and just pull the rest of these injector cups out. Then I'm going to go through and clean these bores out really good. Make sure we don't have any oil or debris in there. And then I'll show you the process to install the new injector cups. So now on the left side, the driver's side, I'm going to have to do something here a little bit different. I'm actually going to go ahead and pull all the glow plugs out. It was something I was planning on doing anyway. You can kind of see the glow plug sitting right there in a little pool of oil. So we're going to pull all those out. The reason I got to do this side here a little different, you can see this injector cup, everything's pretty nice and clean. You get to the one next to it, and it's completely full of oil. So that's going to lead into an issue where I'm not going to be able to get the tool in there. It's probably because the cylinder's full of oil, and I may end up causing damage or just fighting the whole thing because it's going to be hydrolocked. It's going to make a mess. So what I'm going to do is pull the glow plug out, and I'm going to kind of roll the engine over and see if I can push some of that fluid out. If not, I'm going to have to get a syringe and just suck all of that down. You can see these other two cylinders, everything's nice and clean. Those are all good to go. So I'm going to give you guys a quick little tutorial here on the way that I pull out a glow plug. I've heard a lot of people kind of struggling with them and saying you need special sockets and everything else. What I use is just a 1/4 inch deep well 10mm socket, and I put it down on the glow plug. I pop it loose, and then I give it just a couple of turns just to back it out. If you go too far, the socket will hang up on the rocker and it won't come out any further. So if you just get it loose, and then take a piece of 1/8 inch vacuum hose or windshield washer line, you can actually slip it right over the end of the glow plug, and then you can just spin this out by hand, and out comes the glow plug. You can put it in the reverse. Super simple and easy to do. All right, so now that I got all the oil kind of pushed out of the side of the engine, you can see that one's nice and clean now. We're going to go ahead and finish removing these injector cups. All right, so we finally got all our injector cups out. Everything looked pretty darn good for the most part. No cracks in any of them, which I was kind of surprised about. Usually what you'd be looking for is right in this section coming up in here is usually where you'd find a crack. You can actually see here where the O-rings were, well, not the O-rings, but where these had sealed into the head. They had a pretty good seal all the way around. And inside, I mean, outside of them just being dirty, nothing really looks bad. So, quite honestly, in a little bit better shape than I was expecting to see. I was kind of expecting to see a cracked one. So, good news on that portion of it. So now for the installation part, this is the tool that I'm going to be using. It's just a driver. It has an O-ring on here to hold this new injector cup in place. So really, you just kind of set this on. That O-ring will hold that injector cup while we're manipulating it to get it in place without it falling off. Now, probably one of the most important steps to this whole thing is not only driving this in square, but you need to use Loctite 620. It's a retaining compound. It's actually very important to use this stuff here. Permatex does make an equivalent. I can't remember exactly what it's called, but this is the more common stuff. So really, all you're going to do is you're going to put a ring around the injector cup here. And you're going to do another ring right around the injector cup here. Do 2 solid beads and then drive it into the head. So that's another reason where this tool is kind of frowned upon now. It's not really more popular than the riffraff tool, because while you're trying to get this thing set up in the head, you have a possibility of smearing that compound. So you got to make sure that when you put it in, real gentle, real smooth, and then when you get it in place, just hold it there, drive it in with the hammer, nice and square and flush. But before I can go and install this, I need to get the heads cleaned up. So I'm going to go ahead and do that, and then I'll be back to show you how to install this. All right, so I got one of these injector boards here cleaned up good enough to where we can start putting an injector cup in. So you can see we went through, cleaned everything out. Really just a wire brush, a little bit of brake parts cleaner. You're just getting everything in there as clean as we possibly can. So now I have the injector cup on the tool, and I got it clean, wiped down, ready to go. I just have to put the sealant on here, and then we're just going to set this down in here, and we're going to drive it home with the hammer. All right, so we're just going to do a real light, thin little coat of this Loctite 620 right on the end here. And then we're going to do another ring right around here. All right. And now we're just going to very easily guide this down into the hole and just drive it in. You can hear it seat nice and solid. And then we just give a little tug. Out comes our tool. Let's just wipe up a little bit of our mess that we made here. All right, now you can see we got the new injector cup in. So there's one down, 7 more to go. Alright, so we got all of the injector cups here installed. Everything's clean and ready for the injectors. I'll go over that in another video here. This is kind of getting a little bit long-winded and probably quite boring. So one thing to keep in mind here, if you're pounding these injectors in, you can actually see that hole right above the injector cup. That's where the fuel comes in. You should have about 1/8 of an inch from the bottom of that hole to the top of the cup. If you have less clearance than that, that injector cup isn't seated. You're going to need to drive it down a little bit further. But otherwise, pretty simple and easy to do on an engine stand. Like I say, if you're going to be doing this in the truck, definitely spend the money and get the tool from Riff Raff. It'll make your job a lot easier. All right, well, thanks for tuning in and watching this episode of kind of a basic how-to on doing injector cups. Again, like, subscribe, share, comment, tell me what you do and don't want to see. Help me get you guys content that you'd like. So till next time, we'll see you. Thanks for watching.